Welcome back, everybody, to the Temple Daily Telegram Sports Podcast. We've arrived to Week 10 of the high school football season, and we have a ton to get to in this podcast. So listen in as we take you through a whole bunch of different playoff scenarios, perhaps. A little bit of recap from last week, looking ahead. Temple's got a big one against Hewitt Midway with a chance to clinch the outright District 12 6A title. And that would feel pretty good coming against a Panthers team that has never lost to Temple.
Nope.
So we're looking forward to that one. And a whole bunch of other games. So this is Josh Weaver once again with Daniel Zepeda.
Hello.
Greg Willie.
What's up?
Marcus Hood.
Howdy.
Yep. And here we go. 12-6A on Friday night. Temple at Hewitt Midway. Belton at Waco. Killeen at Killeen Ellison. And Killeen Shoemaker at Coppers Cove. Just one team in 12-6A has clinched a playoff spot, and that is Temple. Only two teams have been eliminated from contention, Waco and Ellison. So there are 3 spots for the rest of those teams. For 5 teams, I guess it is, going into the last 2 weeks of the season. So a lot could happen. In District 5-4A1, Stephenville at Gatesville. Not a whole lot happening there. In District 8-4A2, Salado at Mahia. Both those teams are 3-1 in district. Salado can clinch a playoff spot with a victory and a couple other things. Eagles have won 3 in a row after their district opening loss to Connolly. In District 10-3A1, Manor New Tech at Cameron Yo. Yo coming off a big win over Rockdale last week. Really pretty impressive victory. And speaking of Rockdale, Tigers at Gerald this week, and then Lago Vista at Troy. Troy, one victory away from sewing up that league championship for sure. They are idle in the final week, but big opportunity for Troy coming up on Friday. In District 8-3A2, Rogers at Florence. Rogers on the brink of a share of a district title at least. And in District 8-2A1, Bosqueville at Bruceville Eddy. Bruceville Eddy also with a chance to get a piece of that district title. And Moody at Axtell, also in that district. In District 13-2A1, Holland at Thrall. Rosebud Lot at Milano. Holland also in the same boat as a couple of those other teams. On their way to a district championship, can get at least a share of it this week. And in District 13-2A2, Chilton at Bartlett. In 14-1A2, Calvert at Buckholtz. In TAPS Division 4, District 3, Central Texas Christian at San Antonio St. Gerard. And in TAPS 6-man Division 2, District 2, Holy Trinity Catholic at Waco Live Oak. Idle this week, Harker Heights Academy and Granger.
That's a lot.
It is a lot. Some good stuff.
Yeah. So is this the week that we introduce a 3-hour podcast? Is that what this is?
I hope not. Because honestly, I don't even want to sit through that.
That's true.
You know what I mean? I mean, we might be here for 3 hours after the fact, but hopefully we don't.
Waiting for the Astros World Series game now?
Yes. Marcus is shaking his head for a number of reasons, I'm assuming. He's not going to share any of them, though.
I think Marcus's shirt was inspired by the Dolphins color scheme. You know, Dan Marino would be proud. Got some teal in there.
Yeah, I just don't even know why I'm here.
A little coral, maybe.
But as I mentioned, District 12-6A, the only team in the playoffs officially so far, the Temple Wildcats. They've won, 6 in a row?
7 in a row.
Since that season opening loss.
Yes, sir.
They've been pretty impressive in district so far, but now, the Panthers coming up Friday night at the Panthers' house.
Yes, the Den.
Yes. How's everyone over there at Temple feeling, Greg?
Well, mostly feeling pretty well, but big question mark. Quarterback Vance Willis, been a great player this year for him. He's got a knee injury that is kind of nagging. He's able to practice, but only up to a certain speed, and he's a running quarterback. So as good of a year as he's had throwing the ball, what really makes us dangerous is his ability to take off and run with it, when the pass isn't there. And apparently, he was held out of last week's game against Waco because the knee just wasn't really responding that well. And I think they knew they could win that game without him, so why push it? They put Samari Howard, the sophomore running back, in his spot, and he had a nice game. Scored 3 touchdowns and ran for, I think, 160 yards. So, he's a viable option, but, it's kind of a domino effect. If he has to play quarterback, take him away from running back, Anthony Jackson is really then the only real viable running back they have left. Whereas if they have Willis, Jackson, and Howard all in there together, it's pretty hard to stop.
Yeah, and with Willis in there, it brings into play obviously all those talented receivers that Temple has as well.
Well, like last week, against Waco, it was the weather wasn't that great, and it was just a running game. And I mean, Quentin Johnston didn't catch a pass. AJ McDuffie didn't catch a pass. Tight end Tyson Magana was really the only guy to do damage in the receiving games. He's actually kind of an emerging player for Temple, but I think Temple really hopes Willis can play, because I think this is a game where they're going to need Quentin Johnston and A.J. McDuffie, maybe not both, but at least one of them to have a big game, because Midway's got a really good defense. I mean, that hasn't been their greatest year offensively, but they're still playing pretty good defense. I mean, they've got good linemen, good linebackers, pretty good secondary. So I think they've got the best scoring defense in the district. So it's not Midway's best team when you look at them. They've lost 3 games. They've been pushed to double overtime by Ellison. They trailed Shoemaker at the half last week, but you still look up, they're 5-1 in district. And as good as James Fulbright was as a running back the last few years, they've got a new guy, Will Nixon, that's signed or committed to Nebraska, and he's a speedster, and he had a huge game against Shoemaker last week. So they still got a dangerous running back. Maybe not quite the quarterback strength this year at Midway, it looks like, but hey, until Temple beats those guys, they're the monkey on the back, and Temple's got to show they can beat them.
And that's the thing. I mean, you mentioned in your notebook that's going to be in Thursday's paper. Temple's results in these kind of big district games over the last handful of years have not been very good.
Every year they have a showdown game, and I mean, not that College Station's easy to beat, and not that Midway's ever easy to beat, because they've won 38 district games in a row until Harker Heights broke their streak a couple weeks ago, and even then I think it took 5 turnovers by Midway to lose by 3. So I mean, it's like they're not just going to give you the game. You got to go grab it and beat them, and they don't lose at home very much. They're very well coached. We've all seen that. So I think it's a very beatable Midway team, but it's going to take one of Temple's best games of the season to go on the road. And the other thing is Temple only has one defensive starter back, so they don't have many guys on the defensive side who have played in this game before against Midway. So they're going to have a lot of young guys kind of rise to the occasion and match Midway's physicality and experience. So it's a tough assignment for Temple, but I think if Willis plays, that'll make a big difference.
It's a big opportunity.
It's a huge opportunity,
I think. I mean, just given the way some of these big games have gone over the last couple years. I mean, obviously Temple's handled Belton pretty easily. Well, not easily, but well enough over the last few years.
There's kind of a tier system. It's Temple can't beat Midway, and Belton can't beat Temple or Midway, and Belton's pretty good against just about everybody
else. Yeah.
One just quick item to mention is not only can Temple clinch the outright title with that home playoff game in the first round, and avoiding Longview, defending state champ, on a 24-game winning streak. I mean, nobody wants to have to play at Longview. It's likely that whoever loses the Temple Midway game will probably have to do that, although there's still a way for Temple to, maybe avoid that game. But this is essentially the game that if you win it, you're probably not going to Longview for the first
and just to get a district championship for the first time in a while is pretty important, obviously. Exactly. And you mentioned a lot of different things can still happen for Temple if it doesn't beat Midway on Friday, and that's kind of the way it is in this district going into these last couple weeks. So many things can happen for so many different teams with regard to the playoffs, and Belton's in that same boat. 2 weeks ago after losing to Killeen, they were almost dead in the water. I mean, just have lost 3 in a row. They're at 2 and 3. They're uphill climb for sure. And then they go out against Ellison last week and execute one of the grittiest game plans they've had all year. With injuries and suspensions to key players. They had the ball for over 33 minutes last week, and Ellison only had the ball for 14 minutes.
That's out of 48 minutes.
Out of 48, it's incredible what they did in picking up a 14-12 victory to keep themselves in the playoff hunt. They're at Waco this week. It sounds cliche to say it, but it's not a given, especially for Belton this year. So they're obviously going to have to go in there, and they're probably going to go with the same game plan, kind of eat the clock, and and take up as much time as they can, get some points on the board, and get out of there. Because
and with a team like Waco that's kind of young and trying to, you never know like when that week is when it might click in and
Right.
they finally, like they weren't total pushovers against Temple this year like they were last year.
Right.
They've got some dudes who are pretty talented. They just
Well, they have, It looks like they've kind of been in games for the most part in the first half, and then things kind of spiral on them as the game goes on. But I mean, Belton just needs to win. They can't clinch anything. They can't even be knocked out of contention with a loss. But winning obviously is going to help their stock going forward, because we can still. We were talking about it, and Marcus, if you want to jump in on this, with Temple being the only team to clinch so far, we could still have a 4-way tie for those last 3 position spots for the playoffs.
Yeah, there's a lot that can happen. I mean, I think I told you guys there's the next 2 weeks. There's 256 basic possibilities, scenarios that can play out between wins and losses. So that creates a lot of possibilities.
We're not going to name all those.
I thought that note you wrote was just kind of a joke. It's
Sarcastic.
Because you have 8 games, or you have 8 teams playing this week, so you have 16 different combinations this week, 16 combinations of win-losses next week, which creates 256 total. We'll know a lot more after this week, but like you said, Belton, they can't be eliminated, they can't clinch, and that's kind of true for, I think, a couple of teams. Midway obviously playing for...
Midway can
clinch
a spot.
And so, you're looking at it, though. If you're Belton, do you want Midway to go ahead and clinch a spot? Do you play a team that's clinched a spot going in next week knowing they don't have anything to worry about? Or do you want a team coming in next week that you can move ahead of if you beat, but kind of ticked off that they did lose to Temple?
Well, what they do sort of have to worry about a little bit is the whole Longview matchup that Greg was talking about.
That's all the incentive anybody would ever need.
I mean, it's just a whole bunch of stuff, because even at 2-4 in district, Coppers Cove and Killeen both sitting at 2-4. Right. They are still alive for a playoff spot. Harker Heights right now is in 4th. And Killeen Shoemaker 3rd behind Temple and Midway. But, things can shift greatly even this week, starting this week, and then going into next week.
And Coppers Cove isn't totally dead after beating Harker Heights last week. So.
Yeah, and even Belton, even if Belton wins out, a lot of where they end up depends on next week's game when Shoemaker and Harker Heights get together. Win or lose, really, that's a lot of Belton's fate depends on that game, because of the point system, you said it was a 15...
It's a 15 plus and minus.
If there's a 3-way tie or something like that. Everything, obviously, in this district is settled head-to-head first, and if the teams are tied, you go by a 15-point differential system.
Cap it at 15.
Capped at 15. So some of those scores kind of come into play, and... I think when you were talking to Skidmore, he tried to break some of it down for you. And he's, everybody's kind of uncertain. I'm not even going to try and get into the scenarios because it's ridiculous at this point.
One thing that will help Belton this week, if Belton wins and Ellison beats Killeen, that knocks one team that beat Belton, Killeen, out of contention right there. Because you're going to have to get to at least 4 victories in district. 5 would probably be advisable, but 4 could get you in. So that is one thing that could help Belton.
One guy not to ask any questions about scenarios to is Scott Stewart at Temple. He won't even entertain the discussion. After what happened last year at the end of Temple, he's like a blinders-on approach to everything right
You have
now.
to be, really.
Yeah.
I mean...
He's got another guy who can pay attention to that stuff.
That's the
They're
thing.
not talking any scenarios.
Your main focus should be getting your team, getting them a victory on Friday night, and whatever else happens. I mean, you can't control what other teams do. You can only control your fate or your win-loss, and hopefully you control your own fate that way. So,
Well, we figured this district would end up something like this, just especially as we started getting into the weeks and the matchups and seeing some of these results. It looked like it was going to be a dogfight to the finish, and that's what we've got. So not a whole lot will be answered as far as the other playoff spots, but what will be answered is if Temple can get that outright district championship, which a lot of our listeners and readers will be interested in Friday night. A lot of our readers and listeners are also interested in District 10-3A1, and just real quick with the Battle of the Bell last week, Cameron Yo and Rockdale. I mean, Yo put together a really impressive victory, holding Rockdale to 3 points.
Yeah.
And winning that game for the second year in a row. Daniel, you were there. What was your major takeaway? I mean, for me, Yo's defense gave up, 59 points in that district opening loss to Troy? I think they've only given up 10 in their last 3 district games, so obviously that defense is coming along nicely.
Yeah, and I mean, it's kind of become the defense we all knew it was capable of being. I think, like you said, everyone was pretty shocked when the Trojans came and hung 59 points in Cameron to open up district play, but they've really come along nicely. The tackling has shored up. I know that was an issue for the Yeomen to start the year, but they've really kind of fixed that. That's secondary too. Going into that game, I really thought the biggest difference was going to be, would the Yeomen secondary be able to contain the wide receivers and the playmakers for the Tigers? Because Rockdale just has so many playmakers, so many guys that can hurt you in the passing game, but as well as a couple of running backs that can break some tackles initially and then find themselves in the secondary as well. So I really thought that was what it was going to come down to. And again, Cameron Yo just had the advantage there. They were able to really play strong defense, really kind of cover guys, just make a lot of guys run difficult routes, run alternate routes than what they were initially going to do, and then have to make adjustments and then not able to get to the ball, or at least not try to get the ball where they wanted to get the ball. So really hats off to them for that. And then really just, their offense, the running game continuing to just kind of lead the Yeomen. They're capable of putting up a lot of points in the passing game. Braden Brashear, their quarterback there, has a lot of weapons. Zachorian Spikes, Kobe Young, a lot of good receivers there. But with James DeBose and then Nico Vargas, their strong running back combo, they really are tough to kind of hold. You've got DeBose, who's more of a finesse runner. He can break off some large chunks. And then you've got Nico Vargas, who'll just put his head down and just run right through you. Really hard to bring down. So credit to that offense for putting up the 31 points. But yeah, definitely the defense was the story of that game. The 3 points, obviously the fewest that the Tigers had scored this season. I think it's the fewest point total they had since... Trying to remember. I think you had it in 2015 when the two teams played each other. They scored 6 or something. Right, and again, it was a Battle of the Bell game when Cameron Yo limited them to just the 6 points. So this is an offense that the fans of Rockdale really aren't used to seeing that many struggles on offense. And Coach Jeff Miller over there in Rockdale, he took full credit. He really said he didn't give the team really what they needed to win in that one. Didn't really have any answers. Last week against, I'm trying to remember who did Rockdale play the week before last?
Troy.
Was it Troy? Oh yeah, that's right. Troy. He, Jeff Miller had mentioned that against the Trojans, they just had way too many not penalties. Well, they did have penalty issues, but that they also had way too many plays for negative yardage, or they just weren't able to move the ball in the second half. And that kind of was the message to begin with. Really, Rockdale could break off a couple of big plays every now and then, but Yo was always there with either a takeaway or just put them in a 3rd and long situation, and they weren't able to convert for the first down. So really making the Rockdale offense work all night long, putting them in situations they didn't want to be in, and then on offense they were just able to kind of take care of business and do what they needed to do. So the Bell once again will stay in Cameron for another year, and bigger than that, the Yeomen are looking at second place right now in District 10 through A1. Let's see there. They clinched a playoff berth with that, so things are looking pretty good for Cameron. And Rockdale, kind of in the same situation they were in last year. They lost Battle of the Bell late in the season and kind of went from the top of the district to kind of towards the bottom, and just having to take care of their final few games just to make sure that they are in the playoffs. So kind of the same situation there, and Coach Miller said they're just going to have to focus on what's left and, have to make sure they put these losses behind them.
Yeah, Troy and Yo have clinched the first 2 playoff spots in that district. Troy can wrap up the district championship outright, right, this week?
Yeah,
the win at Lago Vista.
Troy's got Lago Vista, and Lago Vista, they only have one loss, so I mean they can still win the championship, but they're just because their only loss is to Rockdale, and Rockdale now has 2 losses. So if Lago wins out and beats Yale in their final game, Lago has a chance at that, and I mean, Troy's probably going to end up winning this thing.
Well, Troy, yeah. I mean, if Troy wins this week, they're 6-0 and they're idle. So that's theirs.
It's theirs. It's just
what's interesting is in that district you could have 2 teams take a 9-1 record into the playoffs, which is pretty rare to think that.
Right.
But that's.
And with Rockdale right now, with losing back-to-back games, they're going to a Gerald team that's got a little confidence, thinking, "Hey, we just won last week, and now we get a Rockdale team that's lost 2 in a row and keeps our playoff hopes alive." So
So looking at the matchups this week with Troy at Lago Vista, if Troy wins, we already mentioned they get that district championship. If Lago Vista loses, it looks like they're still going to be in if Rockdale beats Gerald, right? Because if Rockdale beats Gerald, that eliminates a couple teams.
Yeah.
Gerald and Academy, right?
Yeah, really the only if Gerald wins, Gerald would have to win really for Lago not to clinch a playoff spot. Yeah, basically.
Right.
Because technically, Academy could still get to 2-4, and Rockdale could finish as bad as 2-4. And
right.
That would include Academy beating Rockdale. So crazy scenarios, but unlikely scenarios.
Yeah, but again, I mean, if Gerald beats Rockdale and Academy can beat Rockdale as well, you're looking at. Yeah.
But in all likelihood, though, the way this goes is, I mean, another one of those playoff spots is going to be taken up after Friday night.
Right? Yeah, well, that's another one where we definitely will know more Friday night. But that district still has some things to work out. It's pretty much, I mean, I think it's going to end pretty much like we thought. The 4 teams that are going we thought would go to the playoffs are probably going to be the teams Troy, Cameron, Yale, Rockdale, and Lago, but can't make that guarantee yet until the games play out. But
do you want to go over some other things you've typed up as far as teams have clinched, district title shares, things like that?
Yeah, I guess I can run down these.
There's a few.
I think you already mentioned, in District 5-4A, Gatesville, they have to win this week to keep their playoff hopes alive. They're 0-8, so they've kind of had a rough year. Salado.
Yeah, Stephenville, they're playing is 1-2 in district, and Gatesville's 0-2. So, theoretically, a win for Gatesville gets them right back in there. But it's still.
But if you lose, you're definitely out for Gatesville because a 5-team district, 4-go, of course. But then moving down to 8-4A Division 2, Salado just needs a win. Have Lorena or Fairfield win to clinch a playoff spot.
Lorena 1-3 in district is at Madisonville, which is 0-5, and then Fairfield is hosting Robinson. Fairfield is 2-2 in district. Robinson's 1-3. So.
Salado at Mejia, that's a pretty good matchup. Pretty interesting.
Yeah, I think Salado won fairly handily last year, but that was last year.
Salado really looks good right now because even if they don't get things to go their way this week, I mean, I think pretty much they're probably going to end up in at least a tie for that final playoff spot. It'll come down to a point system there, but
there'll be 3 playoff appearances in 4 years for Salado under Coach Allen Bear, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, the worst they can do is actually finish 3-3. So you have those other teams that have 3 losses, which is why that's all Salado needs is either their win or one of those other teams to lose that I mentioned, or Lorena or Fairfield to win, basically.
Yeah. Salado's the type of team that no one really would want to play in a playoff game. I don't think that slot T is pretty consistent. It's going to do the same thing every game, and it's just a matter of occasionally they run into someone more talented. Like Connolly's really good and has some big college-bound players, and I mean they were barely good enough to beat Salado this year.
Right,
had to come back to do it, I believe.
Yeah.
So I mean, Salado can probably beat anybody if they have a favorable matchup. If you can't be disciplined enough to stop that 3-headed rushing attack, you're probably going to lose.
I think, and defense is especially important for Salado too.
Yeah,
if it takes a minute for that offense to get going in a game, you better have that defense. Have your back a little bit and keep the opponent at bay as well while that thing gets going.
Yeah, that's why teams like that actually like to have the ball first, really, a lot of times, just because their offense is going to eat up so much clock on that opening drive. Let the other offense just sit there and be like, oh, okay, when are we ever going to get in?
Yeah.
And get there.
Kind of like Ellison last week.
Right, exactly.
They say like the
playbook.
quarterback usually gets like a lot of publicity and credit and all that stuff. And like if you play quarterback at Salado, no one really talks about you.
And it's been the coach's son the last 2 years too. So it's
you're not exactly glamour boy. You're just like, who am I going to hand it off to right here?
Yeah, you got to know exactly where that ball's going. So a smart kid there.
You're like, I hope I complete my one pass a game.
Yeah.
Then we've talked about TID 3A Division 1.
Yeah.
Rockdale, all they have to do is win, and they've locked up a playoff spot there. Then
which would also lock up Lago Vistas.
Right. Yeah. I mean, basically, it could be all decided this week.
Yeah.
Rogers, they locked up a playoff spot. That's a 4-team district. Basically, the final spot's going to be whoever wins out of Florence and Hamilton, so we don't really care about that.
Already in is Rogers, Lexington, and Clifton. Rogers 8-0.
Right.
And winning last week in a close one, 14-6 over Lexington. That was a season low scoring output for Rogers, but it was also a season low points allowed by a point.
Right.
But still, I mean, that's that just shows kind of what Rogers. The ways Rogers has won this year. It's been blowouts, it's been close games, holding opponents when your offense is being held to. I mean, that's it doesn't look good, but it's still fairly impressive.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that Lexington, there were a couple players that had kind of transferred in or transferred back to Lexington. It's kind of an issue in the district about were they going to be eligible or not, and apparently the district committee let them play, and those were two big players. Lexington's big back who had 100 and something yards. I don't have the totals in front of me, and he kind of made a difference, but Rogers just created the turnovers good enough to win the game. I mean, Lexington's got the type of team right now that they can go far in the playoffs. And like when I was talking to Charlie Roten after the game, it's like, they're going to do some good. We just don't want to see them again in the playoffs. But if we do, we know it's going to be pretty far deep, so that's okay. Mm-hmm. But we definitely don't want to see them again. I can understand that. That's not a bad Lexington team that's going to be playoff bound. And Rogers, they're obviously not a bad team. And so that's that district. Then an A2, A1, Bristol Eddy's basically playing for the outright district championship this week against Bosqueville. Bosqueville, Italy, and Bristol Eddy have all clinched playoff spots. Bristol Eddy has at least a share of the title because the worst they can do is get one loss.
Right.
And 13-2A1, Holland and Thorndale are in. Holland is in the same boat. They'll clinch a share of the title, no worse than they can clinch the outright title basically with the win this week. Well,
Thorndale could still tie it, right?
Yeah,
They've got the tiebreaker.
I didn't write that down because
they clinched the top seed anyway, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Thorndale is idle this week, so Holland can clinch at least a share this week to reach 5-0 in district.
13-2A2, Fremont and Granger in. The other game, this week's games don't really mean a whole lot as far as if Chilton wins, they're going to lock up a playoff spot, but for Bartlett, the other team, local team in that district, it more or less comes down to next week when Bartlett and Iola get together. Two teams that have not won in district. The winner of that one will pretty much have that spot locked up. In our 6-man district, Buckholz, if they can somehow manage to beat Calvert, which is always a good team, then they've got the playoffs locked up. Otherwise, Calvert's got it, and really Buckholz could go and win either this week or next week to get that final spot. But
3 straight wins.
And also, it would also depend on what happens if they don't win this week. It would also depend on the other game between Oglesby and McDade. And then in our TAPS districts, I was looking at the bracket, and the TAPS 11-man District 4 or whatever they call it, all 4 teams in this district make the playoffs automatically. So, boo. And then the TAPS 6-man, 5 of those teams will make the playoffs. So Holy Trinity Catholic, basically, if they can just win one game somewhere down the road, they're probably going to get in the playoffs. And I'm pretty sure those brackets have been updated. And I kind of recall that's kind of how it was last year as well. So, there's not a whole lot of big playoff scenarios except for 12-6A on the line this week. But there's some games to watch out there, definitely.
For sure. Well, and Greg, you mentioned just real quick at 10-3A1 has a chance to send 2 teams at 9-1 into the playoffs. I feel like both those teams, Troy and Yo, are still somehow under the radar, which is weird. At least for Yo, they've spent so many of the past years highly ranked, which has helped and hurt them in some ways. But this year, I think they're right where they want to be, surging and still kind of off the grid a little bit. And Troy's the same way. I mean, Troy's putting together a really impressive season, and it's kind of not going unnoticed by us at least, but in other areas of 3A, both those teams are almost kind of being overlooked in a way, which is odd.
Well, and Troy's only loss was to a 4A Robinson team that had just had doubled in enrollment. So, I mean, Troy's, for their weight class, they've been a very strong team all year. And had some really impressive wins on their resume when you look at it.
I'd almost say, maybe it's just my perspective, but it seems like all the teams that we've been talking about, Rogers, Holland, Bruceville, Eddy, Troy, Cameron, all year, all of them, I know they're we have our new ranking system with Dave Campbell's, but it seems like all of them, I mean, it's like a side note for the rest of the state in a way, and these teams are just rolling teams and beating teams that they haven't beaten in a while. And
what has Holland not done to be a really highly ranked? But, to be honest, you've talked to most coaches, they don't care anything about the rankings.
It does not
That's
matter.
kind of something for people to talk about, people. But I mean, the coaches are like, that doesn't even enter their sphere of concern.
No, they're okay with beating the people they're beating,
and some would rather not be ranked because it does put a target on your back. Not as much now. I mean, with the AP rankings, definitely got more publicity and acclaim, and that was actually voted on by a statewide panel as opposed to just a few guys in an office.
Right. Yeah. What we have now is not.
Yeah. That'd be like if us four here just decided to put together some rankings.
Yeah.
Oh, let's do it.
Good idea.
Troy's number 1.
Troy's number 1.
So who is the pound for pound best football team in the area right now?
That is a good question.
Any classification?
I'd actually go with Holland.
Yeah, I think you got to go Holland.
I'm still going to go with Holland.
I mean, you just got to look at their stats. I mean, as a team, they're they got the best defense in the area, 126.5 yards allowed per game.
Yeah.
I mean, on offense as well, 480.5 yards of offense a game. I mean,
only behind 6A Temple in that category.
Yeah. So
Albert's got him going good over there.
Yeah, for sure.
Clay Cooper kind of looks like Thor a little bit.
Yeah, he's averaging a ton of yards per carry. I mean, he's only got 89 carries, and he's got well over 1,100 yards rushing. So
1131.
Yeah.
So
And he missed a game.
right. Yeah. Well, and speaking of stats, Daniel, I think you got to wrap us up with your weekly rundown of our area leaders.
Stop us if you've heard this before.
all right, we're doing roll call. Here we go. Greg, I'm going to ask you for all the input that you can give me.
The transitions.
All right, so your area rushing leaders going into Week 10 this week. Nathan Quattlebaum out of Bruceville, Eddy, 1,857 yards, 23 touchdowns. He should probably eclipse the 2,000-yard mark this week. We'll see what he does. Zach Robachik out of Troy, 1,574 yards, 24 touchdowns. Cameron Valdez out of Rockdale, 1,199 yards, 19 touchdowns. Charlie Hudson out of Central Texas Christian, 1,174 yards, 17 touchdowns. Carlos Reyna out of Granger, 1,133 yards, 20 touchdowns. And then wrapping up your top 5 or 6, it looks like. Clay Cooper out of Holland, as we just mentioned, 89 carries, 1,131 yards, 16 touchdowns. So I don't know the exact math, but I mean that's probably a lot of yards.
Should I mention once again how many players we have who have a lot of rushing touchdowns?
There's a lot of players with rushing touchdowns. You got.
You can say that again.
Yeah.
You had a bunch of them.
Probably will.
Anyway.
But moving on to your area passing leaders. We got Rockdale's Jace Robinson. He is the area leader in yards passing, 1,899 with 26 touchdowns. Braden Brashear, the other side of that Battle of the Bell rivalry, out of Cameron Yo, 1,848 yards, 23 touchdowns. Vance Willis having a big year for Temple, 1,441 yards, 16 touchdowns. Trapper Enzor out of Bruceville Eddy, 1,307 yards, 15 touchdowns. He really leads the passing attack for the run-heavy Eagles. Zane Spinn comes in next out of Holland, 1,249 yards, 13 touchdowns. And then the dual-threat quarterback, Ruben Jimenez out of Belton, 1,159 yards, 11 touchdowns on the year.
Awesome.
Good stuff, right?
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Inside jokes are so good for
And
a
remember-
podcast.
Remember, we're sports writers, not sound engineers.
It's like they never know. All right, and then to wrap up, here is your yards receiving leaders heading into the second to last week of the season. Keyshawn Raven out of Rockdale leads the area with 765 yards receiving, 10 touchdowns. Braden Lilly out of Academy, 728 yards, 5 touchdowns. Kobe Young comes in third out of Cameron Yo, 673 yards, 10 touchdowns. Quentin Johnston for Temple, 620 yards. Yeah, 620 yards, 7 touchdowns. My bad. Zachorian Spikes coming in next out of Cameron Yo.
That would be 1,240 yards.
Maybe we should just start this again.
Let's recap from the beginning. Zachorian Spikes from Cameron Yo. He comes in fifth, 571 yards, 6 touchdowns. Joseph Crathers out of Gerald, 481 yards, 4 touchdowns. And then another guy out of Holland, Caleb Curley, 441 yards on just 13 catches this year for 4 touchdowns.
Awesome. I really mean it this time. Please have a great weekend.
Thanks.
You're welcome.